You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters in loss who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, I'm originally from Alabama, but have been living in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area since I finished undergrad because I moved here to go to grad school and have just stayed ever since. I'm a licensed medical social worker, and I work in a hospital coordinating discharge planning for patients. A lovely wife, her name is Chandler. She's a first grade school teacher, and we've been married since 2017.
Awesome. So yes, take us back on your journey to parenthood and share with us your loss story and your adoption journey.
Okay. We first started planning to try to conceive before we got married, and we got married in July of 2017. And we started with Chandler first because we knew she had a history of fibroids and she had had a few fibroid surgeries. So we started trying with her, and we did a few attempts with her through IUI, medicated and non-medicated. And it just didn't work. So we decided to give her a break because we found out that she had to have yet another fibroid surgery. So we wanted to give herself time to heal. So we started with me, and just like magic, the first try of IUI attempt with no medication, I got pregnant. And right before we actually got married, we found out that I was pregnant with twins, and one of the babies just stopped developing. So we knew we had one viable fetus that was still growing, and everything was going smooth. I hit 20 weeks. It was 20 weeks. And out of nowhere, we had just come back from visiting my family in Alabama for me and my dad's birthday. And at like 6:30 in the morning, I felt a pop. And when I felt that pop, all of a sudden, water just gushed out. And I knew exactly what it was. I was like, Mama, I think my water is broken. But because that second fetus was still there and the sac was still present, even at my 16-week checkup, we thought that maybe that was what it was. But lo and behold, we got to the hospital to find out that it wasn't the case. And it actually was the amniotic fluid from our son, Chandler. And I was, of course, panicked. We didn't know what to expect because the whole time we were trying to get pregnant, the only thing we knew that we needed to do was get out of the so-called dangerous zone where you're at a greater risk of miscarrying. And we had made it past that mark. So we didn't expect anything else to happen other than we would go to the hospital on my due date, have a baby, and come home and be one big happy family. Well, that didn't happen. So we both felt, I guess we were just naive to pregnancy because we learned about pregnancy in school, learned about it through our friends, but we never knew what PPROM was until it happened to me. And we are very strong in our faith. So we did a lot of praying even before we got married and did our premarital counseling. So I think that was the foundation that we needed to face what we did not know we were going to face with my pregnancy complications. At that week mark, I had just turned 20 weeks on that day when my water broke. I remember the doctors coming in and saying, well, because you're so early, we might as well just go ahead and induce labor. And I said, well, am I having contractions? And I was like, no, you're not. I said, well, is he in any distress? No, he's not. I said, we're going to just wait. So we waited, and the goal was to get to 23 weeks so that I could be admitted to my hospital. So I was discharged after about 4 days from the hospital that I was at because they wanted to monitor me. I have always been this very independent person, but going through the uncertainty of what's to happen next, it really challenged me as a person. And it really brought a lot of insecurities out of me that I didn't even know I had. Like, I became very clingy to my wife. I really wanted her to be there all the time, and that was not me. And then I was afraid every night when I went to sleep that something was going to happen. Like, am I going to see blood when I wake up? Am I not going to feel him kicking? So it was a hard time. And we counted down the days until we got a week under our belt, and counted down the week until we got another week. And then we made those additional 3 weeks, and I went to my doctor's, and they admitted me to the hospital, where we thought I was going to say it was Halloween. We thought I was going to be there until February. And about a week and a few days into my admission, the nurse noticed that Chandler's heart rate was kind of dipping. So they observed me all that morning. And by the afternoon, they made the decision that I needed to have a C-section right then and there. Like I said, 23, almost 24 weeks. And I had already knew what the goal was. 24 weeks, they can work with the baby. And then all these statistics about how girls are stronger, boys tend to be a little lazier. So we were already dealing with all of that, but we had faith. All of a sudden, I'm being rolled to the the OR for this emergency surgery. We were trying to call my wife. She's teaching. So I knew she wasn't going to be able to answer the phone. So I had to call my parents in Alabama, tell them to keep calling her until they got her, to let her know to come to the hospital because I was having a C-section. We did the delivery, and they got Chandler out like in no time. But before they could even get him out, my doctor, and again, for me, the reason why they feel like I ruptured my membrane so early is because apparently after I got pregnant, there were some fibroids that no one knew I had. Like, not even the fertility specialist saw them, but he told me that they were so small that they would not be an issue, and they were outside of my uterus. I never knew I had fibroids. I've never had menstrual cramps. My cycle comes and it goes, and I'm like, oh, happy, ha, ha, ha. And I had no heavy bleeding. So there was no sign that I would have any issues. But when I got pregnant, those fibroids literally took over, to the point where even before my membranes ruptured early, I was having to go to the doctor. My doctor wanted to see me every week because of how fast they were growing. And I had 4, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And they literally pushed in until they caused my placenta to rupture. And before they could deliver Chandler, the doctor said that they were stacked on top of each other like an ice cream cone. And she had to take 2 large ones out, and they were bigger than him before she could even get to my uterus to deliver him. My wife made it there just as he was being rolled to the NICU. And then that was a journey of closing me up after the C-section, which took a little longer because of how they had to go into my uterus. But everything was fine. And I had him around 1:30 in the afternoon, and I could not see him until around 6 when I had to come out of post-op recovery. And I saw him, and I fell in love right away. He looked great to me. I was looking at the fact that I couldn't believe that I had a baby, because with our journey of trying with my wife first and then with me, it was just miraculous. Despite everything that we had faced, we both had faith that he would come home. We knew he would probably have to stay in the NICU for a while, but we had faith that he was coming home with us. So when I saw him for the first time, all I was thinking about was, okay, now I need to get back to my room so I can start pumping. And that was my goal. And I got back into my room, and I was waiting for them to bring me the pump. And then the nurse comes and she says, you guys need to come back like right away, because it looks like his heart rate is beginning to drop. And I'm like thinking, that's crazy. We just saw him. His vitals were fine. Why would we need to hurry up and go back? Like what? Like he was born at 1 o'clock. Here it is 7:30, almost 8 o'clock. And suddenly something happens. So the doctor came in, and he was giving us his take on everything. And he didn't feel like it was going to be good. And he said the struggle right now is to just get him through the night. If we can get him through the night, then we can definitely come up with a better game plan by tomorrow. We waited, and then, of course, the nurse came and got us and took us back. And when we went back, by this time, his heart had completely stopped. And to see his body, his lifeless body there, and them still trying to, because I work in the healthcare field, I asked her to stop. Because I knew 15 minutes, the brain without oxygen, that was the toughest decision I had to make as a mother. And that was the first decision I had to make as a mother after he was born. And my wife didn't understand it, but she understood it after that, because she's like, I would have just had them keep going. I said, well, he was already gone. And yeah, so that was the first night of being without him. But this hospital was great because they allowed us to spend time with him. And I was thinking about him fairly recently. I think about him all the time, especially when I look at my daughter, because they look exactly alike. But I was thinking about him, and I remember that moment when the nurse brought him into our room. They have all babies when they're first born. They had him wrapped up. You could not have made me believe that my child was not still alive because of how well they had him prepared and how delicate they were as far as the nurses to bring him in to spend time with us. And we held him, we cuddled with him, we talked with him. We were just so thankful. We told him how proud we were because so many doctors had told us how slim it was a chance for him to survive. So the fact that he survived for almost 8 hours was a blessing to us. It was the gift that we needed because we kept praying, God, please let him be born alive. Let him be born alive. Let us be able to see him. And not only did he see my wife first, but he also was able to see me. And like I had written in my questionnaire when I first got the questionnaire from you, Erica, about my loss journey, it wasn't until I went back to work. I took my full maternity leave and then a couple of weeks extra to spend time just grieving and adjusting to life without him, as well as trying to figure out how to pull myself up out of the muck that I was in. I mean, postpartum depression is one thing, but postpartum with a child loss is a completely different ballgame. So I went through all of that, and I was at work one day and I was just replaying everything in my head. Lord, what was different? Like, help me to understand what changed from 1:30 until around 7:30, 8 o'clock, when all of a sudden his vitals just started dropping. And it was as simple as day. I heard this voice say, he was waiting on you. Because like I said, he had seen my wife as soon as she had gotten there and waited with me and finished with my surgery. She went to see him right away, but I had not seen him yet. And it was what I needed, the comfort that I needed to know that he knew not only who we were as his mothers, but he knew that we loved him and he knew the prayers that we had prayed for him. So that was the reassurance that we both needed in that moment. Fast forward to, I had to have a myomectomy 4 months later. I knew I wanted to try again, but I knew I wasn't ready. So we started again with my wife. And this time we were not only doing IUI, but we had started doing IVF treatments later in the year of 2018. And unfortunately, we were still at the same place with her, not anything working. And by then I knew I was ready to try again. And we tried again with me. And like clockwork again, I got pregnant the first try with IUI, again, unmedicated. And we were happy, but at the same time, a bit cautious. Well, before we even got married, we knew that foster care was a part of our ministry as a married couple. And we completed our classes. We started the process in October of 2018. I had found out on that very day that I was pregnant with our rainbow baby. In our season of waiting, it was a lot of praying, a lot of meditating on the word. And there's this one verse in Luke chapter 1 that just became my mantra. It was, blessed is she who believed that the Lord would be faithful and deliver to her. That was my verse that carried me. I did not know when it was going to happen, but I had faith that it would happen. And I remember that day when I took that pregnancy test, I didn't see a line. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got to start this process over. And my wife was like, no, something is here. And she freaks out. And I just instantly, when I saw it, I just began praising God because I was so happy. I was so grateful. And I was so thankful that he had chosen us again to be parents to a biological child. We didn't know what that pregnancy journey would look like for me, but we had faith that God would bring us through and we would bring our child home in our arms as opposed to in our hearts. So as we are going through my pregnancy, we are on the list to actively receive a child for foster care. And we got a few calls, but we had specified our age group of 0 to 6 because we didn't feel comfortable with teenagers, especially being in this area and easy access to public transportation. And at the time, we lived like literally above the metro station. So that was a concern for us. And we had gotten a few calls for kids that we did not feel we would be the best placement for. And in that process, May of 2019, I lost my sister, my middle sister. So we were going through grief all over again. On the 1-month anniversary of her passing, we got a call from the social worker saying that they had a placement. And this was a 3-week-old baby, a little Hispanic girl, they said, who needed a home. They didn't know if it would be long-term, but the social worker felt like it would have the potential to be long-term placement because this mother had already had a child that they had taken from her custody as well as had adopted. So we said, of course, we'll be there. Well, if you can take her, you need to be at the hospital tomorrow to get training on her and then bring her home. So we had to go out and buy everything because the stuff that we had was for a boy. We had Chandler. So we had to get girl clothes. We were excited. We were nervous. And I was pregnant. So that night, no one got any sleep because we were so excited as to what was going to happen. And then we were also excited about the fact that we were going to be parents to a child that we didn't birth. That wasn't something that we were afraid of, but we were just excited. And we also felt like God was giving us yet another thing to accomplish, as in, if I can trust you to be loving, giving, kind to a child that you didn't birth, then I know I can continue to give you guys more and more and more, because that is the most selfless thing, in my opinion, that a person can do. Love someone that doesn't come from or through them. But she came to us. We picked her up from the hospital because we had our idea of what she would look like. We were thinking little Hispanic girl with black hair, a little bit of tan skin and curls. Our daughter was the palest baby in the NICU. And she also had the beginnings of red or either strawberry blonde hair. So we kind of laughed and was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And God has a sense of humor because we were both African American. And the nurse took her from her incubator and placed her in my wife's arm and said, here are your mommies. And instantly I became overwhelmed emotionally because we were her mommies. And not only were we her mommies, but she was coming home with us. So we brought her home at 3 weeks old. And we knew at that time that we would have our daughter and they would be 5 months apart. And September 5th, 2019, the day after I had just had my 28-week checkup, I was at work, nothing out of the ordinary. And around that afternoon, I started feeling like this terrible sensation. It felt like I had a bad case of indigestion. I tried to walk it out. Like I was like, well, let me just take a walk. Let me drink water. Maybe because I hadn't eaten anything. Maybe because I had just had a crazy day that day. And I had just lost track of time of making sure I ate, making sure I drank water, making sure I used the restroom. But it just wouldn't go away. So I called my wife. I couldn't get her because she was wrapping up with her school. So I just left her a message to tell her to call me when she got the message, because I didn't want her to panic, but I knew something wasn't right. And she was also picking up our daughter from daycare. So 15 minutes after the first sense of heartburn, indigestion, all of that uncomfortable feeling, I decided I need to go, because all of a sudden my stomach felt like it was on fire. I could touch it and it was like this excruciating burning sensation. So I told my boss, I said, I have to go. Most people would say, well, you already at a hospital. I wasn't at my hospital. And I wasn't at my hospital where my doctors are familiar with my history. They know what had happened before my first pregnancy. I needed to get to my hospital. And I tried my best to get there, and I could only make it one exit from my hospital. And I knew if I called 911, they would turn me around and take me back to the hospital, which I work, and that was not an option for me. And looking back, even the following day on September the 6th, I knew God was in the plans, and he orchestrated everything that happened that day, because one of my girlfriends is a police chief with the local county police. And she has a pretty busy day, as you would imagine. And I called her as soon as I was walking out of the hospital. And instantly she answered on the first ring. She didn't say, hey, girl, what's up? Like she normally does. She said, are you okay? Now, I wasn't due until November. And here it is September. And she says, are you okay? And I said, no. And she said, I'm on my way. Tell me where to meet you. And I told her the exit that I was going to be at. She came to me, sirens, because it was bumper to bumper traffic. She got me into her car. We literally drove the shoulder all the way up the highway until we can get to the hospital because traffic was horrible and I needed to get there right away. She got me there. We got signed in. My doctor just so happened to be on call that day. They checked my vitals. My vitals were stable, like they were normal, not what they should have been for the amount of pain I was in. I was in a 10 out of 10 pain. And I just kept pleading with her, is my baby okay? She said, Tiffany, we're going to check on her right now. She did everything that she could to reassure me and keep me calm. I wasn't hysterical. I had this peace about myself, but I was still anxious at the same time because I didn't want there to be a situation that I had had before. It's too early. I know it's too early. I was thinking that it was only a bad case of indigestion, but the more I touched my stomach, they couldn't even touch my stomach to examine me because it was hurting just that bad. They got me on the monitor. They were trying to check the baby's heart rate and everything. And the doctor made the decision right then and there. She said, Tiffany, I think your uterus has ruptured and we need to get you to deliver right now. And I just remember them ripping off my clothes. I said, call my wife. And that was the last thing I remember. The next thing I remember is I was awake and in post-op recovery. I have no recollection of them even taking me back to the OR. But I do remember telling my wife, I can't do it again because we had already made the decision. We have embryos for her that we had tried with her and we were unsuccessful. And I had already made the decision, okay, once I have the baby and I give myself time to recover, I don't mind carrying for you. But I remember the first thing out of my mouth was, I can't do this again. I'm sorry. We're going to have to pray that you can do it, but I can't put my body through this again. And the doctor co-signed it because I've been with her for years. And she said, oh, no, she's not. We're done. And I knew I was done. Unless God says otherwise. But for right now, I'm done with carrying babies. But at any rate, it was what the doctor suspected. She told me that my uterus had ruptured at the fundus, the top of the uterus, which is also where they had to go in for Chandler in 2017. So here it is 2 years later. And my uterus ruptures, despite the fact that I had healed and I was taking McKenna injections every week from 16 weeks until a week before delivery. I was supposed to stop them right before the week of delivery. McKenna injections is pretty much progesterone injections that they give you if you've had a compromised uterus to kind of help strengthen your uterus. And the doctor feels if I had not been getting that regimen, then what happened with Chandler would have more than likely happened again with Poet. And that's my daughter's name. So she came to see me the next day and she said, Tiffany, I don't know how you were able to do it, but staying as calm as you were, your vitals were normal and they were not reflective of the pain that you were in, nor were they reflective of what was going on with you internally. She said, I just needed to come to see you and hug you and let you know that God has a special calling over your life and your baby's life. Like I said, I had just had an ultrasound checkup the day before. And that was also the first day that I got 3D pictures of my daughter. And when the stenographer was completing the ultrasound, she said, you're going to notice this shape in her face. She said, there's nothing on her face. That's the placenta. Her placenta is in the front of your uterus. And as you go through your pregnancy, you may not feel kicks as much because it's serving as a cushion. And I say that to say this, not knowing that the next day that my uterus was going to rupture, that placenta served as a barrier that kept my baby from coming out and free floating in my abdomen. So that's why I said God was in the plan. What some people may have seen as a burden, like, oh my gosh, I want to feel all the kicks. It ended up working out for my good because it kept my baby in my uterus where she needed to be. And I was thankful to God for that. And when I saw the picture that the doctor showed me, but thanks be to God. And then now it's the journey of getting her through the NICU. I had had a baby in the NICU before who did not make it out of the NICU. So of course there was a lot of anxiety, and leaving the hospital without my daughter brought on the same issues that I faced when I went home empty-armed without Chandler. Even though I knew she was still alive, I just could not sleep peacefully, knowing that I was here, she was there, and I didn't know what the night would bring. She was a tough girl from day one. They had her on the ventilator, so she was just on high flow for a little while. It was a tough journey. She was in the NICU for 44 days. And then she came home with us. And she came home to meet her big sister, who had enjoyed cuddling with her in my belly throughout the pregnancy that she was with us. And it was a huge adjustment, but in a good way. Like it taught me a lot about myself. It's a strength that I did not know I had, that I tapped into as I was walking through my journey of healing after losing Chandler. And she came home on a monitor that she had to wear every day, nonstop, that monitored her respiration as well as her heart rate. And that gave us a little bit of peace, but it also gave us nightmares because anytime it would beep, even if she just moved and it kind of lost contact with her skin, there was this blaring beeping noise that woke everybody up in the house that would frighten you and say, okay, my gosh, is something going on? Is this a real alarm or is this just her moving? So she had to wear the alarm for the first 3 months of her being home. And of course, at this point, I've been out of work, just chose not to go back. And then I needed to be home with her and I needed to be at the NICU. I just could not leave her. So I finally returned to work at the end of January, almost February. Everything was good, and she went to daycare. They both ended up going to daycare, and they got RSV the first week of being in daycare. And then I felt guilty, and I felt like, oh my gosh, Lord, what is this? Here we are again. I thought we were done with the ups and downs. She made it out of the NICU. She had graduated, as they say, from wearing her monitor after 3 months. And now we have this RSV thing. And after you've lost a child and you become a mother of a living child, the paranoia is just insane. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself and some other women who have experienced a loss and became a mother afterwards to a rainbow child. They've all talked about the paranoia that you tend to feel with the slightest thing, where you feel like, okay, is this something that I need to worry about? Oh my gosh. You can't see, for me, I'll say this, I couldn't see it as a small thing. My mind would take me to, okay, this small thing can lead to this, that could lead to this, that could lead to this, that could lead to that. And then I don't know where that will put me and my family. I don't want anything to happen to my child. And I don't know how I can survive what I've already survived with Chandler again. In addition to being fresh out of grieving my sister who had just passed in May, and my daughter has her middle name, and it still is a journey. And this past the 5th, a few weeks ago, we just celebrated our daughter's first birthday, but she's technically just 10 months old because she's premature. And it's been a great journey with her and our daughter, who was placed with us in June, and we legally adopted her in July 16th, and she's our forever daughter. She has our last name, and we're just thankful to God. It's amazing how we went from being mothers to Chandler during my pregnancy, to being mothers of loss, to being mothers of waiting, to being mothers of foster children, to being mothers again of our biological child. And just thanking God for all that he's done. And I remember telling one of my friends recently, I said, Chandler made us mothers, but our daughter Bella made us parents because we were able to parent her. We got up with her at night, took her to her doctor's appointments, and having her in our life has been nothing short of a miracle because, one, we're 2 Black lesbians, and sometimes people don't always see as people who should be considered, 1, a family, and 2, parents. But God sees us differently, and we're thankful for that. And then to not only be parents of our daughter, Bella, my wife is from Mississippi. I'm from Alabama. Like, those 2 states alone can be just as backwards as it comes to anything else. But our daughter is not only ours, but despite, contrary to what the social worker had told us, we were bringing home this Hispanic little girl who needed a home. We found out 2 months into her placement that she's not Hispanic. She's actually Russian American, and her eyes are blue and her hair is red. So we have this daughter who looks nothing like us, but the look gives us when she sees us is beautiful. She doesn't see anything other than two mommies who love her and care for her, and to see them together is beautiful. Like, we know that their future is destined for greatness. We trust God. They will be wonderful contributors to society because they both have a story to share. They both are NICU grads and they are our daughters. So we're just thankful to God for what he has done for us. And we are still active foster parents. We put ourselves on a hiatus list just so we can kind of adjust to life now with our two daughters, forever daughters, as well as trying to get over the pandemic. My wife having to teach from home and I'm having to be at work because I work in a hospital. So we just didn't want to take on another foster child right now because we don't know what it would look like for our family, especially with schools being closed. We are still active, but we are not taking any placements. And they do that a lot of times when you get a child that you adopt, to kind of let you adjust and enjoy the child that you just adopted. So we are going to start back taking placements in January, and we're excited. We don't know who God will bring to us, but we know that he will use us to do what only he can do. And that is our journey. That's our story. And it's appropriate for us. And it was written for us. And it was written for us even before we were born. So we're just thankful.
I love your story. I love the twists and the turns and just how God really orchestrated it through the loss of Chandler to you getting pregnant again and then going through that whole pregnancy and then finding out that you got placed with this foster daughter who they clearly did not identify her, right?
No.
And then, you all finding out that she's a Russian American, and obviously, you sent me the picture with the blonde hair and blue eyes, and it's just amazing story and journey to parenthood. And I love that you all are still going and seeking to do adoption, or not adoption, but foster care again, staying on the list, because what people don't know is just that, once children gets placed, the way the foster system is designed is for kids to go back with their parents, but they still need to have a safe place to do so. So I'm so happy that you all are still open and willing to fostering other children as well. So how have you and your family really been doing throughout this pandemic? You do have two preemies, like you mentioned before, they had RSV before, so they have some respiratory issues just because of, premature lungs. How have you all been staying safe? How's your family been doing throughout this pandemic?
It's been extremely hard, especially with me working in the hospital. And the hospital that I work in, we were hit extremely hard when this thing first happened. So I had anxiety every day going to work. I would come home from work, immediately strip down to jump into the shower to clean myself because I didn't want to bring anything into my home. And coming home at the time, Bella had just started crawling. She's our oldest daughter. And as soon as she would see me come through the door, she would get all excited and crawl over to get me to pick her up. And I had to just leave her sitting there. And it would just break my heart because she didn't understand why I wasn't picking her up. And then she would try to follow me into the bedroom so that I could pick her up, but I couldn't do anything until I cleaned myself. So I didn't want them to get sick. We didn't know how this thing was really transmitted. And because we had so many cases in my hospital, and we also had a person who tested positive in my department, I was just extremely paranoid. And it's gotten a lot better now. But for them to have to go back into daycare, because my wife, the first semester when everything happened, the teachers were allowed to do pre-recorded lessons. So the girls were able to stay home. So they've been home since March. And then putting them back into daycare a couple of weeks ago, because I wasn't able to work from home, it caused a lot of anxiety because daycare was where they got RSV. And I didn't want to put them in daycare and they end up getting coronavirus. But the daycare is still they're still in a small setting. And it's not a lot of kids there because a lot of the kids' parents are still home. So it's gotten better for me as far as my level of comfort with them being back in daycare.
That's good. So I would love for you to share with the listeners just some encouraging words as they go through their journey, because as you mentioned before, your wife was battling fibroids and you all, spent the money. This is a lot of money. We're not talking about just chump change on going through IUIs and IVF for both of you all. And then to go through the foster to adoption portion alongside of that, that just takes a toll on your relationship financially, but then just emotionally as well. So leave the listeners with just some encouraging words as they go throughout their journey to parenthood.
Encouraging words I can say is to just stay faithful to your purpose and to your call. If God told you you're going to be a mother, then don't let anything take that from you. It may not come in the way you think right away, but as long as you stay faithful to your calling and stay rooted in his word and stay grounded, it'll happen. Because with Chandler, we were pregnant with two. We lost both, but we now have two daughters that we weren't even expecting to conceive. We weren't even expecting to get, because we thought once I had Chandler, we were going to be done. My wife would have a baby and that would be it. But I'm glad we didn't stop there, because had we stopped there, we wouldn't have Bella and we wouldn't have Poet. And now I can't even see my life without either of them. And I don't know if people are keen to doing foster care. And for us, foster care was in addition to our family. It wasn't in a substitute to us not being able to conceive. So I'm not saying if you haven't had a child yet, just do foster care. I'm saying if it's something that is on your heart to do, because there are a lot of kids who need it, then do it, because it's a rewarding, it's very rewarding. And even though we have now legally adopted our daughter, my heart still aches for her birth parents, because I know what it's like to lose a child in a physical sense. And for her mother to make that decision to say, I can't raise her, every day I think that was the most selfless thing she could have done for Bella. And that was the toughest decision she could have made as a mother. Just like the decision for us to stop CPR with Chandler was our toughest decision. The toughest decision that a mother can make for a living child is to say that they cannot raise them. So if there's a mother who can say that, then I would hope that there are many families who are willing to entertain the idea of doing foster care or foster care to adopt or just straight adoption, because it's rewarding. The kids need it. And there is extremely a high need given the pandemic that's going on, because a lot of kids are at home full time. And unfortunately, that's causing a lot of stress on parents. And there are a lot of kids that are still entering the system, as well as those who are slipping through the cracks. So I would just encourage anyone to look at motherhood, parenthood through a different lens, because the lens that we may look at it in a traditional sense is it exists, but there are also, in addition to other ways to become a mother, to become a parent, and sow seeds into a child that has a trajectory for the rest of that child's life. And that, to me, is the most important thing that my wife and I could have ever done, because now we are sowing seeds into these two girls. We're praying that God will allow us to have another child through my wife once she gets back to wanting to try IVF again. We do want that. But if it doesn't happen right away, we're still creating a legacy with our daughters. And we're just thankful. And for any other child that will come to and through us from foster care.
I love it. So where can we stay connected with you after this episode?
My Instagram is at itz_me_tip, TIP. And I also have email. It's tflakes33@gmail.com. If anyone has any questions, if anyone needs any guidance as to how to start the process of foster care, I'm more than willing to talk, not only as a foster parent, but also as a social worker.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing your story and your light with us. It's been a pleasure and such a blessing.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.